Well, good morning. Welcome. Glad to have you here and to participate in worship together. It was an awesome time. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching online this week or whenever you're watching it, whatever week, day, month, year you're in, we're glad that you're participating in this service today. And hope to see you out here soon in person as there's nothing like coming together with other like-minded people. We're going to continue in our series on the book of James. Last week we kicked it off and talked about trials. And we all face trials in times of life, and there's just no way around it. They're going to happen. It's part of living in a world that has sin in it and the fallen nature of mankind. This was going to happen. We're going to have trials. But James was encouraging his reader and us that when those trials come, that we would persevere. We continue to stay focused on God. We continue to move forward in Him, no matter what hard things there are, that we would not give up because we have a destiny with Him someday. And so we are to persevere and not turn our backs on Him. And that's what James was telling us in the first part of chapter 1. And today we're going to continue in chapter 1. And he comes up to temptation in life. And I think they're connected there because a lot of times our giving in to temptation brings trials into our life that were unnecessary. Right? There's all kinds of trials in life. There are trials that come along that we just can't help. You get sick, you get some sort of disease, you have something like that takes place. That's just part of life. You're going to have that. You can't do anything about that. But then there are things that cause trials. We make a bad decision. For an example, you buy something that costs a lot more than you really should have spent on. Now you're going to deal with the consequences of a payment, or maybe not be able to make the payment and having it lost or taken away from you, repossessed, all these different things because you made a bad choice. So sometimes our bad choice, and especially if our bad choices are sinful, then it brings trials and difficulties and things into our life that we don't need. And so just as we all face trials, we all face temptations. And all kinds of temptations, as we talked about last week, there are all kinds of trials, from things maybe not too big to stuff that's persecution for our faith, as the original reader of James would have faced, even to the point of death. And so temptations are the same way. There's things like, should I eat the second piece of cake? That we probably shouldn't do. But if it's not necessarily, maybe a few more calories, maybe a little bit more weight, but as far as our relationship with God, that second piece or third piece or fourth piece, whatever it might be, your temptation of having isn't that big a deal. But there are some other issues that might come along in your life that the consequences are sinful. They bring barrier between you and God. They'll bring barriers between you and your relationships with other people. And we have to deal with those as well. And so these temptations are going to be there, and we all have to learn how to face them and to address them so that we will be making the best choices of following God and getting all that we can out of this life on earth and get to that place, that final destination of heaven sometime. Not that we have to do certain things to get to heaven. But as followers of Christ, who put our faith in Him and what He did and the work He did on the cross so that we could be forgiven, our response is to try to grow and become as much like Him and to live that life and to be an example to others. So it's important. So I want to pick it up in verse 13 of chapter 1, James 1:13. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He tempt anyone. So right out of the gate here, he's saying, hey, look, sometimes you're going to get tempted and you're going to say, God, why are you doing this to me? Why are you tempting me? Why are you doing such and such? Why did you send this thing to be right in front of me to make me want to do this or whatever it might be? Why did you send this trial right here? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And we want to blame God. And he's saying, hey, it's not God tempting you. God is pure. He is perfect. That's why when He sends Jesus, who's pure and perfect, who is the part of the Trinity, who is God. He comes, He's pure and He's perfect. He can't sin because he doesn't have sin in Him. And He doesn't have that sin in Him, so He's not going to tempt you. It's just not part of the nature of God. One of the best examples of seeing this acted out where we can see that God isn't someone who brings temptation, or God isn't the one who brings trials, is in the Bible itself, and it's in the book of Job. And if you've never read the book of Job, it's probably the first book written of the Bible. It's not in the order of the Bible, but it's probably one of the first books written, one of the oldest books that we have. And it's the story about a man named Job. If you read it, it looks like Job, but we pronounce it Job. And at the very beginning in chapter 1, we're told about Job. Job is a righteous man who loves God and is doing the things he's supposed to do. And he's living a good life, and he's living a blessed life. And then in things that I don't understand, in a spiritual realm, it tells us that the angels were coming to God and interacting and talking. And the devil comes along to talk to God. And as they're talking, Job comes up. And the devil's like, yeah, of course Job loves you. Of course Job does all the right things because you keep blessing him and you've protected him and nothing bad's happening to him. He's got a big family and lots of animals and barns and homes and all this stuff. And because you're so good to him, that's the only reason why. And God's like, oh yeah? No. That's not the truth. I think God tells you he would still worship me anytime. He would still stay righteous. And so the devil goes, well, let me at him. And God agrees. So Job he ends up losing his kids, his stuff, his home. It just becomes disastrous for him. But his attitude in chapter 1 of Job, verses 22, he says this, it tells us this, in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. In these times of trials, and this time of temptation to turn on God, a temptation to blame God, a temptation to say God is being unfair to me, God is doing these things to me, Job says, or does not sin in that. He doesn't give over to that temptation to blame God. See, he has that attitude of what we sang and talked about at the end of our worship time. Nothing else matters. Long as I've got God, nothing else matters. As long as I've got God, all my things don't matter. As long as I've got God, nothing else matters. Job also said, the Lord gives and he takes away, but blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, Job's wife wasn't as righteous as him. She comes along and just says, hey, curse God and die. Just get it over with. Blame God. Remember, these are her things too. These were her children too. This was her family as well. And she's like, just curse God. And Job's response is this, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? And it tells us again, in all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. That's Job 2, verse 10. So, now Job says, hey, if God's going to give and take away, he sees it that God's in control, God's doing this. But he didn't get to see behind the curtain. We got to see behind the curtain. We got to see what went down. No, God allowed it to happen. God didn't send it to happen. And it's the same thing with us. When we face trials in life or we face temptations, God isn't sending these temptations. He's allowing them, but He's not sending them. In fact, the next verse tells us who sends them, who causes the temptations. You might be a little bit surprised at who it is. Verse 14. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires and enticed. Ooh, wait a second. I thought the devil made me do it. We've heard that, right? Oh, the devil made me do it. According to this verse, you made yourself do it. You gave in to that thing you knew you didn't want to do, that you knew you weren't supposed to do. Well, the devil made me do it. He tempted me. According to James, your own evil desire led you there. Your own thoughts, your own wanting to led you there. You tempted yourself. Now, I'm not going to throw out that the devil doesn't help. I think the devil recognizes our desires, and he'll tempt us, and he might throw some stuff that helps us pursue our own desire, but it starts with our own desire. An example of this, I've used this illustration before, but it just fits, so I'm going to use it again. There's this guy who's decided to cut out donuts. They're bad for him. He's got some cholesterol issues and stuff, and he loved to stop at this one donut shop on his way to work every week or every day. And so he would drive by, go out, get his Bear Claws, get his chocolate bars, maple bars, get his sprinkled covered frosted donuts, old-fashioned donuts, all the different types of donuts and things. Different thing every week because he loved his donuts. But he decided, I got to give it up. And he said, and to make sure I give it up, I'm not even going to drive by that. So on Monday, he starts out going, I'm going to drive this way to work, and I won't go by that special donut shop. There's some others on that path, but I don't care about their donuts. It's that donut shop. But on Tuesday morning, he's like, it doesn't hurt me to drive by it. I mean, maybe I'll get a little whiff and just see it. It's not a big deal. And so he drives by the donut shop on Tuesday. I'm like, all right, I saw this. It kind of smelled good. Not a big deal. But man, on Wednesday morning, he goes, I got to smell it, but just a little whiff. If I drove slowly through the parking lot, I could smell more of the donuts coming out of that bakery. And so the next day he drives through the bakery and kind of takes a whiff. Thursday he says, if I just park there for a little bit, I could sit longer and just kind of take it in. Maybe I could see some through the window. Not a big deal. I'm not eating the donut. I'm just thinking about the donut. I'm just smelling the donut. I'm not having the donut. So he does that on whatever day of the week I'm on. The next day, he's in the donut shop. And he's got his Bear Claw and his maple bar shoved in his mouth. So it was his desire for the donut. And there was a bunch of little things that built up to the eating of donuts. Okay, donuts aren't necessarily sinful. Unless we're in a obese situation and a gluttonous type of problem going on, then maybe. But for the most part, it might cause some health issues and some things, and it's not smart, it's not good for you. Maybe you shouldn't eat that many donuts. Maybe you shouldn't stop at the donut shop every day of the week. But it's the same thing in sinfulness. See, because for that man, he's like, maybe he went home that night and told his wife, I ate donuts. I don't know what happened. It just happened. No, it didn't just happen. You thought about them on your way on Monday, but you didn't go by the shop. On Tuesday, you went by the shop. On Wednesday, you stopped and took some time smelling the shop. And on Thursday and Friday, you sat there and went in. And each of those things kept building that desire to want this product. It starts as a little thing in our mind. I remember in college studying one of my psychology classes or something. They did this study in a movie theater, where they were showing a movie, and you know how movies, they're really still pictures put together, taken real close together, and then they run, and so they split one of those little frames and put a Coca-Cola advertisement or something like that. I think it was Coca-Cola in it. So as it goes moving, you don't even see it. But what they found out in this study is that the sales for Coke in that theater went up when they started doing that. It was subliminal. It was in the mind. The thought was dropped. And something in the mind starts building. And it's the same way with the guy and his donuts. And it's the same way with our sinful behavior. It doesn't just happen. There are steps that lead to it happening. Let's take it into our world. And hopefully this isn't something any of us are dealing with, but I wanted to deal with this morning. And because I think I probably heard this from friends and stuff in school and that made this particular mistake in their life. See, the friends and those of us believers, we understand that God created man and woman. He created them to get married and to live a life together for one another. And that sex is to take place within that union. And I met many young people and people that were my friends and stuff and that, and they'd make the mistake of having sex before they were married, even though they had made the commitment to themselves and to God that I'm going to wait. And then they say, I don't know what just happened. We just were there, and it happened. And I'm going to argue it doesn't just happen. And this can go into every different types of life. Affairs, stealing, lying, and all these different issues. There are processes that lead up to this, but I wanted to start with this one. So let's just say that this particular incident happened on Makeout Lookout Hill. Right? Makeout Lookout Hill. Don't even know if that place exists by that name, but let's say it does. And let's backtrack a little bit. So what led you guys up there? Well, we had been with the movies, we had been with a group of people, but we just wanted some alone time. We just wanted to be by ourselves. You know, we didn't want any distractions, and we just knew it's kind of up there, and it's secluded, and it's pretty, and you can see the city lights from up there. And so we just kind of went up there, thought, well, you know, it's okay, well, why'd you want to be alone? Well, I thought maybe I could get a little snuggling in and a little kissing. Oh. So there was a thought process. A little hug and maybe a little kissing, but that's good. But what happens is the seclusion, the darkness, the prettiness, the little bit of hugging, a little bit of smooching, a little bit of whatever, it begins to build on it. And you make a decision that you don't want to do. And you take it back even farther. What led up to that? What are the things that are going on in our minds? It's maybe thinking about the one day when this will happen too much, and desiring, and maybe even the conversations that the couple might be having, or the conversations we have with our friends about what they're doing. It influences us, and we're kind of thinking about this realm when we really shouldn't be thinking about that realm. But those little things start building and building until we're now driving up to be in a secluded area instead of staying in a safe place. But it can even go further back than those conversations and this and that. But what kind of things have we been looking at on social media? What kind of people are we following and pictures that are being coming up? What type of movies are we watching? What are they portraying in relationships? Because as we watch those relationships in the movies and the TV shows and in the music and the songs we listen to, it starts to become normalized that this is how relationships are supposed to be, and that's not how God designed them to be. But they start those things building up on it. And so it can go back as far as just some little thoughts, some little things that are put in our head through the songs and things that we watch, and we kind of dwell and we think about that, but I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to think about that. And then it builds and it builds and it builds. I had a friend in high school whose parents were not the best parents. And I remember her telling a pastor at a church saying, you know what, I don't want to be like them. They're just this, and list of things that she didn't want to be like. And that pastor looked at her, I'll never forget it, and said, if you don't want to be like them, don't think about the things they are. Think about who you want to be. Because the thought process and what we're thinking, what's going on in our head, what we dwell on, will build up and influence us in the decision we make. It becomes that desire that grows and grows until it becomes sin. We act on it. The desire, the thing that pops in our head, is not sin. It's the action on it. And in that sin, depending on how long we stay in it, how far we go in it, it brings us to death spiritually. It may bring death to our relationships, death to doing things that it just brings death. And ultimately, death, separation from God for eternity. And so James is telling us, watch for the small things and deal with the small things. You see, if we just have a log and we catch that log on fire and it's just one log, we can kind of deal with that. It's not a big deal. It's kind of like driving by the donut shop. I can handle that. But the problem is sometimes when you play with fire, the forest catches on fire. And then that's a whole new world. And you can't put it out yourself. You got to have the county fire department, the state fire department, other states start sending in fighters. You need a whole lot of help. And sometimes when we start letting those little logs of little sinful, evil desires to build up in our heart, all of a sudden we're into the sin. And like we need a lot of firefight, we'll need more people in our life. Most important, we need God. We need God at the beginning, but we need God to help us navigate through that process. to put the fire back out and to get back to where we really want to be. But then God also uses people, our church family. That's accountability and talking and praying for one another. That's why accountability on that back wall, you look at some of our values. Accountability is a value. Why? Because we help each other deal with the fires. We help each other do the right things that keeps us from fires, to do the fire protection stuff. We need one another. We need each other to keep those at bay. Because in verse 15, then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. And actually, I meant to read that before I did my illustrations that I just did. But that's what that verse is talking about. It all builds on each other. Verse 16, don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from God, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. God, who is the creator of all things, is good. All the good gifts that come are of Him. And I believe that James is telling us, think upon Him. Paul tells us that in Philippians. Whatever is good, pure, perfect. Think about these types of things. Think about God. Put our desires towards God. He is good. He's not tempting you. He's reminding us here in verse 18. Verse 16. He does not change. He does what's good. He does what is right. And then verse 18. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all He created. He chose to give us a birth to the word of truth. That is Jesus is referred to as the truth, the way. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is God in the Trinity. Time to go in and understand that, but there are three parts of God: God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So God came down and said, I am going to live a life. They're going to have temptations. They're going to have evil desires, and they're going to follow them, and it's going to separate them from me. And I don't want that. And I don't want to make them follow me, but I want to give them the opportunity, and I hope they will. So I'm going to provide a way. So they sent Jesus to come and to live out a life and to sacrifice for us. That is the truth. And for those who put their faith and believe in Him, we become those followers of His, and we want to live for Him. We want to do those things back to Him because of what He did for us. And they're for our own good. All the stuff He teaches us to stay away from our own evil desires are for our own good. And then we can reproduce in other people, and we can share that message with other people. And so that brings us today to the question: how are we doing with temptation? And temptation can be in so many. We can be tempted to just not pray and to kind of just, I'm going to be a good person, but I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to read my Bible. I'm not going to go to church. I'm not going to do these things. We can be tempted to try to cheat at work, not really do the whole job, and steal from work. We can be tempted into sexual sins. We can be tempted into gossiping, pride. We can be tempted into so many things. We can be tempted into drinking, drugs. There are so many different things that are just blatantly out in our world that are anti-God, that can be enticing to us. And so we need to stay focused on God and battle these temptations. And there's some good news though. 1 Corinthians 10:13, Paul tells us this. Paul tells us there that God will not allow any temptation that you can't handle. That's good news. And that's good news for you. And you might be arguing with God right now in your mind and your heart going, that's not true, because anytime these temptations come around, I give in. So if God didn't let things come that was too big for me, why do I keep giving in? It's because of your own evil desire. Now, I think there's a certain level where God says, okay, I'm not going to let that, because that they can't handle. But if there is a temptation that you are facing, a trial that you're going through, something that you keep tripping up into and you're making the choice to do, and you feel like you can't, keep persevering, just as we talked about last week. Keep working. Keep doing the stuff work. Bring church family into your life that you can trust with the information and share. Bring them into your life and let them hold you accountable and talk to them about it. Take the steps that you need to take to defeat whatever it is that's tempting you. Because from God's own word, you can handle whatever it is that's really your temptation. You can handle it. You can do it. For just an example on my own life, I have never had a drinking problem. Never been drunk in my life, never even had a buzz. I've tasted some different drinks and stuff through the years, but I just really don't have a desire to drink a lot. I just don't. And I can't help but wonder from this text, is that because God knows if I got into that, I wouldn't be able to handle it? So He has prevented me from maybe having that temptation. And so I've never had to worry about battling drunkenness. And I don't know for sure. And if that's the case, I thank God that He's given me that. But for the things I do battle, I obviously should be able to beat them and conquer them. And you can too. And that same verse there in Corinthians goes on to say that not only will God not let temptation that comes your way more than you can handle, He will show you a way out. He will show you how to avoid. He will help you out of that circumstance. But we have to let Him do it. The problem is we want to do that temptation. We want to have that. We want the whatever short pleasure that comes in the moment. We want it. And so we go after it. We're not looking for God saying, here's the exit. It's over here. Because we really don't want to see the exit. Oh, we might be going into the situation going, I shouldn't be doing this. I know it's wrong, but I'm going to dip in one more time. Thankfully, God keeps forgiving me. But this verse says eventually it turns into death. So how do we do that? We got to figure out what those desires are. We need to bring it from the big forest fire down to the log. What are the little steps? What are the steps? Back to the illustration of the man in the donut shop. One was getting closer and closer and closer. And with each thing, he hasn't sinned yet. It's just temptation. But he's built such a desire in his heart for that donut that he gives in and he eats the donut. We do the same thing with sin. So how do we shift it? What do we do? So here, I want to give you some suggestions. And these aren't all of them. But the first one is we need to make sure that our desire, our number one desire, is God. Nothing else. I want to share a little secret. I didn't even notice it happen. Last week we were getting ready for worship, and Jaden said, I want to switch this song. I don't even know why you want to switch it. He goes, I want to switch this song to next week. I don't know what his reason, but I think God used whatever reason He had to switch it. Because He switched ending last week with Nothing Else to ending this week's service with the song Nothing Else. We need to get to that point where nothing else matters but God. Our number one desire is God. Nothing else will do. Oh yeah, you can do all things for me, but number one thing is that my desire would be to be in your presence, to be with you, and to just hang with God, doing the things that God would want me to do. The most joy, remember in trials last week, consider it great joy. When we get through the trials, there's joy. When we get through temptation, there is joy. And when we get through the temptation knowing we did the right thing, there is a joy that comes from God that's unlike any other joy you will experience. So we start with desiring God. And we try to control all of our thoughts and the things that we do towards what is good and perfect, the things that God would give us and bless us, and the ways that God would lead us. So what are those things? How do we do those things? It's not easy. It takes a process and an intentionality of doing and thinking the right way. And it's easy to get lazy. But it really is a thing that we should do. It's not even my notes, but in the Psalms it says, meditate upon your word. We need to spend time meditating, thinking through what God is doing. Now, in my notes, I do have to keep focused on God through reading His Word. But more than just reading through the words, but thinking about, what does this mean for my life? What does this mean for the world? What does this mean and how much God loves me? I mean, if we stop and meditate, it's one thing for me to sit here and say, hey, Jesus came and died on the cross for you and rose again, conquering death, so that you could just come and put your belief in Him and ask for forgiveness and be forgiven. But what if you meditate on that and you start thinking about how much love went into that? That the Son of God, who is in heaven, has everything perfect, would come and become His own creation. Wow, that is saturated in love. That is amazing. God loves me that much that He would do that? That's incredible. And I've shared this. I remember when we first started having kids, and when they're little and they're sick and they don't know that they're sick, I just want to go, God, give me that cold. They don't understand that just in a couple more days that they won't, the stuffiness and the runny nose and the coughing and the throat, whatever it is that they're facing, will go away. Lord, just take it from them and put it on me because I get it. It was harder for me to watch my kids be sick than for me to be sick. Wow, what love God had that He would watch His Son die for us. So we think about all His goodness and what He's done and the good things that are in our life. We're told that all good things in our life are from God. Anything that is good and pure, it's from God. So your children, your family members, and even if you are in a time where you're not getting along and you don't like each other, you still love each other. And they're still there. That's one of the cool things about really good friends and family members. You'll have your myths, but you also know they're there for you. We're there for each other. And so we just think about these things that God's given us and all the good stuff and the things and we make that our focus. We make God our desire, pleasing Him, living for Him. And then any other desire comes in, we gotta ask ourselves, how does this compare to what God wants me to do? How does this compare? And as we do that, we start comparing what we're taking in and how those things taken in are influencing us. I had a friend years ago who was telling me when he was in high school he had anger issues. Not all the time, just at times. There were days, just for no reason. He would just be in an angry mood. And he sat down with his youth pastor and they just started talking through it some bit. And it turned out as the different questions they'd ask, what he thought about, what he'd listened to, and different things of the day, they found a pattern. On certain days when he had this irritableness, this angerness, he was listening to the certain style and band of music. And that particular band, it influenced him into an irritableness. Now, you and I could probably listen to it and it would just be music or whatever, and it wasn't a big deal for us. But for whatever him and his makeup, he come to recognize if I listen to that, it puts me on an edge and an anger that I don't need. And so he had to learn to cut that out. We need to learn what are the things that we take in that influence us and start causing us to take that next step towards our own evil desire. And we need to get a hold of it soon and turn it back over to God. We need to recognize it. And I think a great way to do that is through scripture memorization or quoting scriptures, or even if it's paraphrasing it at some point. An example I want to give you of a verse, and and to use when you start to feel that desire building up, that temptation building up and growing, and wherever it is in that process, that you would use a verse such as Matthew 16:24. Jesus said this to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." Okay, I want to be Jesus' disciple. I want to be like him. Disciple means a follower, someone who's trying to be like that person. The word we would use today is mentor. Oh, I want that person to mentor me because I want to learn to do this job like that. I want to learn to be like them. I want to be mentored. I want to be discipled. And so anyone who wants to become more and more like Jesus and live that way so we can be an example to the world would say, I want to be his disciple. Jesus says you must pick up your cross. And in that moment, your cross might not necessarily be picking something up physically, but it's saying, I'm not going to do that because that is not in line with what God would have me to do. So sometimes to pick up our cross is to put down our evil desire. And then to follow him. And as I stated before, God is good and pure, and he's not going to tempt us. And if we put down our thing that we want to do, the desire that we have that is wrong, and we follow Jesus. What would Jesus do right now? I know that became a big selling thing in the 90s, those bracelets and shirts everywhere you went. What WWJD was everywhere. Maybe got a little too commercialized, but it was a very good thought process. Hey, where would Jesus have me do right now? How would he have me respond? Would I give in to the anger that's building up in me and I want to punch this guy? Or am I going to back off, take some breaths, get away from the situation, cool down, and then handle the disagreement? Because it all builds into doing stuff we didn't really want to do. So we do that as we're going through our day, and we got to make a conscious effort that when something draws our attention that is what we have said committed to not do, to quickly come up with this verse or other verses that are like it or something that would help you with maybe specifically to whatever it is, your temptation. And there's some different ways you could try to find verses that way. I would help you find some verses. You can look them up using the YouVersion Bible app and stuff, put in your topic of whatever it is you're dealing with, and it would bring up some suggested things. Ask other believers that you know that will maybe help know some verses. But we learn those things. And when those things come up, we're going, you know what? My own selfish desire is creeping up, but I want to bring in what I really want, and that's God. And I'm going to cover it with that. And it might mean I'm going to pray right now. I might call a friend right now. AA is a successful program. And one of their things is call your sponsor, call someone to help. When you're wanting to give in, call someone. That's biblical, friends. When we're wanting to call someone, hey, pastor, I am about to do something I don't want to do, just pray for me. Hey, my brother or sister from church, my church family, someone who believer, man, I'm just struggling with something and I don't want to let that desire grow anymore. Pray for me. Talk it out. Do whatever it is. But we need to stop them in their tracks. Keep our focus and our desire on God and doing that. So this morning, as we close, I want to encourage you. If you're here or watching online and maybe you just never have put your desire on God in any way, in any form. Maybe this is all new to you. Maybe you're hearing about Jesus and dying for your sins. You can be forgiven by just believing in Him. Maybe this is all new to you today for the first time. But even if you don't know about Him and this and that, sure there are people that you're going, yeah, there's things I can't stop doing. I don't get it. Well, I want to let you know it's because of your own evil desires and that God has put something in you to want Him. It's in our nature. And those two things fight. And the best way to start beating that is to start by putting your faith in Jesus and saying, I'm going to follow Him. And it's not going to be easy. It's just not going to come along and take all those bad habits, those sinful habits away. It doesn't happen overnight. usually. Occasionally, there are some people who said, this is the last drink I'm ever going to have, and they just throw it down and never do it again. I think more people, it's a battle. For more people, it's a battle. It's an ongoing battle. And He wants to help you. He won't allow you to be tempted more than you can handle. And He'll help you, show you a way out. But we have to work. And so it doesn't mean temptation will go away. It doesn't mean you won't mess up again. But it means you're focused on the right things and you're going to be heading the right track. And that someday you'll go, I'm a new person. I didn't respond the same way I have in the past. I do things differently. I think differently. I talk differently. And it's because you're on that journey of desiring God. Jaden, would you come up, please, and just play in the background a little bit as we close in prayer? Play Nothing Else, please. And I'm going to close this in prayer, but I also want to give opportunity for us to commit our lives to Him and to commit our own desires to Him, wherever you might be. Maybe you're in a spot where you're really struggling and giving in to that temptation. May today be a day that starts your focus change and you start having more victories. And those victories start becoming more and more often until one day you go, oh wait, I hadn't even really thought about that in a little while. And you'll have new things to work on. There's always stuff to work on. But I don't know what's in your heart, what's in your mind. But I want to invite people down to just pray together. You can kneel at the altar, you can stand. But I would like to pray with you and believe with you. If you want to give your life to the Lord, I want to pray with you. And I'm going to invite you to come down as well. And when I come by, let me know. I want to start this relationship with God. I want to restart this relationship with God, wherever you might be. And so I did mention, maybe you're in that keep failing, but you come. But maybe you're just recognizing there's some little things. And I'm not failing, but there's just some desires, and I need to shift those desires. And I want to just come forward and ask God, help me with these desires, that I would keep them focused on you, so that I can journey this road with you. And so I'm going to pray now, and then you can be dismissed. Come back next week, because we're going to look what James says what to do next. Once you're dealing with the thoughts, getting your desires right, understanding I'm going to persevere. He's going to show us how to do that. And that's going to be combined as part of the message for our business meeting, but also kind of the kick in the pants, hopefully, for what we need to be doing this next year and ongoing. So, dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for all that you've done. And Lord, I pray that today that our desire, that we would all commit to our desire, that our number one desire would be you. And Lord, that we would learn to navigate, to follow your lead through the other desires that are there. That we would navigate through the ones that we have to dismiss and the things that are okay, because there's going to be desires and things that are fun and that aren't necessarily good, great in the sense that, it's going to help us grow closer to you, but there are also things that are just fun that you've given us to have that aren't bad for us either. And that we would just you help us journey through that path. That we would become more like you. But our desire for you would just become most important. More than anything else. We thank you for that. So I'm gonna rearrange my question a little bit. I gave several reasons to come forward. Now I'm just going to give a reason for all of us. As a commitment. If you just want God to be your number one desire, I'm going to encourage you to come and spend a few minutes in prayer. And then when you're done, you're dismissed. And we hope to see you Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for some food and some Bible study, some fellowship. God God bless you.